Hey, Mike here. I just wanted to let you know that you can listen to Dark Poutine early and ad-free on Amazon Music, included with Prime.
Sorry, buddy. I made Mike get up really early this morning.
You really did. Welcome back to Dark Poutine. I'm Mike Brown with a big yawn.
And I'm Matthew, and I just ate pancakes.
Oh my gosh. You ate pancakes? And I wasn't invited. Again, I'm never invited.
I was really hungry while I was reading the scripts today, and I made pancakes while I was
I'm
writing.
so grateful that you read the scripts and have some feedback. I am so grateful.
Hey, Mike.
Yeah.
Let's tell everyone out there, you and I did an episode for another show.
We did, yeah.
And it was fun. So I do a different show called the Too Old or Pure Gold Movie Podcast.
Yes.
Where we get different generations of people to watch an 80s movie and then talk about it from different perspectives. And so if anyone is interested, Mike and I did episode 38 of the Too Old or Pure Gold Movie Podcast.
Yes.
The movie was, Mike?
They Live with Rowdy Roddy Piper.
One of my favorite
movies. It's John Carpenter, so yeah. Yeah, go there and listen. You can find it anywhere you podcast.
It's very different. It's very fun.
On a sunny Wednesday afternoon on the 21st of June, 1950, the tranquil tobacco farming community of Langton, Ontario, was shattered by a violent crime that would leave an indelible mark on Canadian history. Joseph Herbert McAuliffe, a World War II veteran turned counterfeiter, walked into the Imperial Bank of Canada with robbery on his mind. In less than half an hour, 2 innocent men lay dead at the robber's hands. Arthur Lierman and William Goddyn, their bodies riddled with bullets, and a community was gripped by fear. For 3 harrowing days, Norfolk County held its breath as McAuliffe, armed and desperate, evaded capture in the surrounding woods. The manhunt that ensued would reveal a tale of tragic childhood, wartime heroism, and a descent into criminality that culminated in a botched robbery and senseless killings. As the story unfolded, it exposed the raw nerves of a nation grappling with questions of justice, redemption, and the ultimate price of crime. This is Dark Poutine, episode 357, Murder and Mayhem in Norfolk County. Langton, Ontario, located in Norfolk County, has a rich history that dates back thousands of years before European colonization. The area was home to various indigenous groups that thrived along the shores of Lake Erie, taking advantage of the region's abundant flora, fauna, and fish. Archaeologists have discovered numerous artifacts in the area, including arrowheads still found in fields around the county, providing evidence of the long-standing indigenous presence. This confirms Matthew's mentions of arrowheads in the region in last week's episode. European exploration of the area began in the 17th century. In 1626, Laroche Dion and 2 other Frenchmen spent 3 months in the region with the indigenous people there. Later, in 1669, French explorers de Galigny and Dollier de Casson reached the area near present-day Port Dover. They were so impressed by the land's aesthetic appeal and abundant resources that they decided to claim sovereignty for King Louis XIV by erecting a cross on March 23, 1670. However, permanent European settlement did not begin until much later. The first community in the area, called Long Point Settlement, was established in 1793 by William Smith near present-day Port Rowan. Following the American Revolutionary War, United Empire Loyalists who left the United States settled in the region and built mills. Norfolk County, which includes Langton, was officially created as a constituency for the Legislative Assembly of Upper Canada in July 1792. The county's size was reduced 6 years later. As European settlement increased, the area transformed from dense forest to agricultural land. Settlers faced the challenging task of clearing trees, cultivating the soil, and building homes to fulfill the requirements for land ownership. The region's development was further shaped by government initiatives to attract settlers. Beginning in 1869, advertising programs were created to encourage people from the UK, Europe, and the United States to settle in Ontario, offering free land and the promise of a better future. This influx of immigrants contributed to the growth and diversification of the area, including Langton and its surroundings. And these are your stomping grounds, Matthew.
This is, and it's really interesting. I'm looking at the, in 1869, they started advertising programs. My family moved there about 50 or 60 years earlier than that. So these are really my stomping grounds. And, it's the tobacco belt of southwestern Ontario. Yeah. And speaking of stomping, do you know the song about tobacco farming called Tillsonburg by Stompin' Tom Connors?
I do not.
Look it up. Tillsonburg's literally like the next town over from Langton, and it's a song about tobacco picking and how his back still hurts. and I worked in tobacco fields all through my youth.
So does your back still hurt?
My back still hurts. You know what's really funny? So, as a kid, I was picking tobacco in fields,
yep.
Right? And decades later, I became the global brand director for Dunhill Cigarettes, which is Demorier in Canada. So my career from like being 12 years old to 40 years old sort of went full circle.
I used to smoke Demorier cigarettes way back in the day.
Yeah. Demorier in Canada, Dunhill the rest of the world. You smoked the posh ones, Mike?
I did.
How long did you smoke?
Oh, gosh. 15 years, 20 years.
Wow. Well, your skin's still pretty good. Glad you put it down.
Yeah. Well, I put it down 25 years ago, so.
Good man.
On the afternoon of Wednesday, June 21st, 1950, Joseph Herbert McAuliffe sat in his black Ford Meteor outside the Imperial Bank of Canada in Langton. The small tobacco farming community of 250 people was about to experience a crime that would shock the nation and leave a black mark on the little town's history. McAuliffe, a 32-year-old ex-soldier and skilled machinist, had been operating a small and secret counterfeiting plant at his property in Windsor, producing fake 50-cent pieces. However, the meager profits of 2 cents per coin had driven him to seek a more lucrative score. He had meticulously planned this bank robbery to fund an upgrade to his counterfeiting equipment.
Wow. Crime begets crime begets crime. Hey, I need better counterfeiting machines, so, I'm going to rob a bank.
Yeah, let's rob a bank.
And then I'm going to murder people.
Yeah, that not so good.
And this is what happens, right?
Yeah.
You get pulled into crime like this, and one thing leads to another.
It's a slippery slope.
It certainly is.
At approximately 2:45, 15 minutes before the bank was scheduled to close for the day, McAuliffe entered the bank wearing a sun helmet and sunglasses. He also wore a dark, loose suit jacket, a dirty work shirt with pinstripes, and dark green work pants. Under his arm was a folded shopping bag, but most notably he carried 2 guns. In one hand he had a Sten submachine gun, and tucked into his belt was a .38 police service revolver. 23-year-old teller, Lavona Leadham, was in the bank's cage just off the vault door serving the lone customer, Frank Hall, when she noticed the stranger approaching. Lavona, not noticing the guns, initially thought the man was just another customer. She told filmmaker Robert Fortier, quote, "I thought he was a farm worker. He seemed to have what looked like one of our checks in his hand." End quote. When McAuliffe got close to Lavona, he raised one of his guns and announced that he was there to rob the place and that he wanted everyone to gather in a corner of the bank where he could see them. Lavona was terrified. She said, quote, "He didn't talk a lot, but when he talked, you knew he meant business. I don't know whether he would have shot a person or whether he would have just shot, but he certainly was prepared to do something to get what he wanted." End quote. Lavona was ordered to back up out of her cage. Before complying, even in the state of panic that she was, she remembered the button for the silent alarm that was under her desk and tripped it without the robber noticing. The alarm rang at Van Horen's garage down the street. A neighbor, hearing the garage alarm and realizing there was a possible robbery at the bank, tried to call police, but their phone at the time was a party line, and it was in use. A telephone party line was a shared local loop circuit that allowed multiple subscribers to use the same phone line. This system was prevalent in rural areas and during times of resource scarcity such as the 1930s and 40s, especially during World War II. Party lines were a cost-effective solution that enabled telephone companies to provide service to more households using fewer wires, as each connection often had to span several miles to reach remote homes. In a party line system, anywhere from 2 to 10 or more households or businesses would share a single telephone line. Each household had its unique ring pattern, known as selective ringing, which allowed subscribers to identify when a call was intended for them. For example, one household might receive a single long ring, while another might hear 2 short rings. However, party lines came with significant drawbacks in terms of privacy and convenience. When one subscriber was using the line, others could not make or receive calls, leading to potential congestion and delays. Additionally, any party on the shared line could pick up their phone and listen in on ongoing conversations, making eavesdropping a common occurrence. This lack of privacy often turned party lines into sources of entertainment and gossip, as well as a means of quickly spreading news about emergencies throughout a community. Despite these limitations, party lines remained in use for several decades, with some persisting into the late 20th century. As telephone technology advanced and demand for private lines increased, party lines gradually fell out of favor. By the late 1980s, many telephone companies began to discontinue party line services, and today they are primarily a relic of telecommunications history.
So I am so old, Mike, that I'm a relic of telecommunications history.
But because you had a party line.
My best friend Meredith had a party line in the 80s.
Yep.
And we were young teenagers. We were best friends. So we talked a lot on the phone, right? And she would occasionally just randomly accuse someone of listening to us in the middle of a conversation just in case somebody was listening.
Oh, dear.
But I was talking to her this morning about this, and she says, I'm going to boil that down to teenage drama because you can hear a click when people pick up, right?
You totally can. Yeah, we had a party line at our cabin in Heckman's Island. And our ring was 2 long rings, and the neighbor was 3 short rings. So we knew to pick up on 2 long rings. Maybe my sister and I might have listened in on somebody's conversation once.
Yeah, my grandmother had one. Meredith's was 2 long and 1 short ring.
Yeah.
And get this, when Meredith's parents moved in that house, the party line was connected to 8 other families.
Oh, wow.
So when she was a baby, her dad had taken the phone apart. Canada's her dad. He took the phone apart, stuffed it with cotton to muffle the sound because it was always ringing so it wouldn't wake her up when she was a baby.
Oh.
You just hear this sort of in the background.
Oh, dear.
Wow, this episode's taking me back.
Good.
Sorry, I digress.
I'm glad that you digress, and it is taking you back. Back in the bank, McAuliffe climbed over the gate separating the public area from the teller's section and forced customer Frank Hall to assist him in collecting the money. Henry Hal Thompson, the bank accountant, said, quote, "He was quite rough, but cool. He had 1 gun stuck in his belt, and he had another gun that he was directing people with," end quote. McAuliffe ordered Hal and Lavona to open the safe, threatening to shoot them if they didn't comply. They did, and while the gunman was busy with Frank Hall grabbing the money from inside the cage, Hal attempted to hide some of the $20 bills by throwing them behind the bank's ledgers on a shelf in the vault. The robber noticed what Hal was doing and angrily ordered Lavona to collect the cash that Hal was trying to conceal. As the robbery progressed, more people entered the bank, including an insurance salesman named Richard Broad, local tobacco farmer Arthur Lierman, and William Goddyn, who worked on Lierman's farm. All were forced to join the others in the corner. Meanwhile, Lambert Van Huren, the owner of the garage, alerted by the alarm, came to investigate and was also taken hostage. As a few of his hostages filled his loot bags, McAuliffe kept one gun trained on them and another on the rest of the captives. According to Hal Thompson, McAuliffe threatened his captives that if they told anyone about what they were seeing or who, he would come back and kill them. Bank manager A.S. Beatty, who had been in his upstairs apartment, chose to enter the bank at that moment. McAuliffe promptly ordered him into the vault with the others. As McAuliffe prepared to leave, the weight of the coins caused the bottom of his bag to tear, spilling the contents all over the street beside his car. Cursing, he grabbed what he could, about $8,000 of his initial haul of just over $22,000, and fled the scene. After McAuliffe's departure, the hostages cautiously emerged from the vault. Arthur Lierman and William Goddyn, not wanting to let the robber get away, decided to pursue him. Neighbors told the two men the direction in which the robber had fled. As Lierman grabbed his .22 from his car, they implored witnesses to contact police, and with Goddyn at the wheel, they set off after McAuliffe's Meteor to ensure he didn't escape.
Yeah, and we know this is going to end in tears, but as a note, back then, and really into the 70s, well, it seems odd now that somebody would grab their gun and chase someone. It's what we did back then.
Yeah. Yep.
It is. It's what we did. Everyone had a gun. The towns were small. The police forces were light. I've been in houses a few times where something happens outside or somebody screams and people grab a gun and as part of civic duty. My uncle was actually on a news program once because he heard a scream, grabbed his gun, went outside, looked around, couldn't find anything, and it was in the long run, it ended up being an older woman in Strathroy had been murdered in her house and found weeks later.
Oh, wow. What followed was a high-speed chase through the back roads of Norfolk County. Realizing he was being pursued, McAuliffe drove erratically to lose his pursuers. Witnesses reported hearing gunshots as the cars raced past farms and businesses. Over the din of the mill he was working in, Clarence Abbott, a witness to the events, recalled hearing a gunshot and seeing one car chasing another. He remembered seeing and hearing a gunshot coming from the pursuing car as they flew by. The chase came to a violent end on King Lake Road, a narrow dirt track about half a mile from the hamlet of Frogmore at around 3:15 p.m. Two teenage boys working in a nearby tobacco field witnessed the horrific event. Bob Nobles, who was 16 then, described what happened next. In the film Murder Remembered, Norfolk County, 1950, he said, quote, "I heard a shot, and I looked up, and I seen these two vehicles coming. They were going quite fast. It was very dusty, and the first vehicle lost control, and he went in a ditch right over there, and the second car stopped right behind him. There was a man in the second car with a rifle or a shotgun leaning out the window. And within 5 to 10 seconds of him stopping, I heard this machine gun and smoke coming from out of the back of the first car. The man holding the firearm in the second car dropped his arm and fell into the car. I dropped to the ground when I seen this. I looked up at different intervals and I could see a man walking back and forth from the first to the second car. And then one of these times he was standing beside the second car and I heard 4 or 5 more shots. He still walked back and forth. And the last time I seen him, he was crossing the fence going toward the woods to the south. I stayed where I was for probably another 10 minutes, I don't know, and I started to crawl out of the field going that way. And I was kind of nervous." End quote. The boys watched in terror as McAuliffe took off into the woods, and when they felt safe, they fled to their respective homes. Members of the OPP finally arrived at the bank, led by investigating officer Len Chambers. Excited witnesses told him what they'd seen and tried to describe the bandit. He later told the documentary crew that he'd gotten at least 7 different descriptions of the man. He took off in the direction the robber and his pursuers had taken. When the dust settled, the full extent of the tragedy became clear. The Plymouth, riddled with 27 bullet holes, became a gruesome crime scene. Arthur Lierman, 31, had been shot 5 times, with the fatal bullet piercing his heart. William Goddyn, 23, had been hit a number of times, with 4 bullets striking his head. all the deadly shots had come from close-range pistol shots and not the submachine gun. The gun that Lierman and Goddyn had was jammed and unusable when they'd been shot. Whether McAuliffe knew this or not is unclear. Both men left behind wives and children. Irma Goddyn, Bill's wife, heard about a bank holdup in southwestern Ontario from the radio via a station out of Buffalo, New York. She didn't think much of it at first, but as the afternoon dragged on and Bill didn't come home, she wondered where he was. Bill and Mr. Lierman had gone to the bank to arrange for money for the harvest. When the car of the family's priest, Father Douglas Boyer, pulled into the driveway, Irma knew something awful had happened. Peter Lierman, Arthur's son, said, quote, "My sister and I were coming home from school on the school bus, and about, I guess, 2 stops from home, my mother's car approached the bus, and the bus driver said, 'Oh, your mother's here, and she probably wants to pick you up.' So we got into her car, and my mother simply said there'd been an accident. I don't think she was aware of the nature of what had happened just yet." End quote. The Lierman family then drove to the scene of the shooting at Kinglake. Peter said, quote, "I remember my mother got out of the car, and I think I did, and someone walked towards us. I can't remember who it was now, and just said it'd be better if my mother didn't go any further." End quote. Young Bob Noble, who'd seen the shooting, came back with his dad to talk with police about what he'd witnessed. That was when he realized that one of the dead men was Arthur Lierman, a family friend. News of the robbery and murders spread quickly throughout the community and soon made headlines across Canada and the United States. The peaceful farming region was suddenly thrust into a state of fear and shock, terrorized by what had just occurred and fearful of the murderer still on the loose. Dr. W.J. Nicholson, who'd been on his way to play golf with a bank manager, found himself acting as coroner at the grisly scene. Quote, "Never did I dream I would be acting in an official capacity," he later remarked. As night fell, a massive manhunt was launched. Hundreds of police officers and organized bands of angry farmers combed the countryside, armed with rifles and shotguns. Pete Potters, a friend of Art Lierman's, recalled the hunt for the murderer. He said, quote, "Feelings were running high, and all of our friends and a lot of neighbors were intent on tracking this man down. So I joined the group for about, I suppose, 2.5, 3 hours, looking at fence rows and old buildings and just generally trying to find McAuliffe. If he'd come out with his hands up, I suppose he probably would have been all right, but if he'd made some kind of attempt to run or show signs of aggression, he probably would have been killed." End quote. Roadblocks were set up for miles around, and civilian pilots from the London Flying Club took to the air to assist in the search. Police warned residents to lock their doors and arm themselves. News teams from radio stations and newspapers descended on the region to cover the manhunt for the, quote, "mad dog killer." The coverage drew gawkers from around the region who came to see where the killings had occurred.
Yeah, and I kind of do love nicknames that the media gives to people. But there's positives and negatives, right?
Right.
Positives is it keeps public informed.
Yep.
It aids law enforcement. That gets people engaged so they get tips. And I think it simplifies complex cases and helps reporting.
Right.
But we've seen in the past, Mike, it glorifies and mythologizes criminals, right?
Yeah, agreed.
It can create unnecessary fear, and it can be misleading to the public. For example, they might nickname thinking it's one person doing it, and it ends up being a few. Right? Yeah.
But this is why I leave that in, because it facilitates this discussion. I mean, it's fascinating that we don't do that anymore, and the reasons behind it are exactly the ones that you mentioned. The conflicting descriptions of the killer added to an already confusing situation. Howard Van Adder, one of the locals looking for the gunman, recalled, quote, "The description we had over the police radio that he was a dark-complected guy that looked like an Italian. So if he'd walked out that night, he wouldn't have been caught because he was fair-complected with red hair and freckles." End quote. Locals recalled the police being skittish about scouring the bush for the killer, seeming to be fearful of the submachine gun that the man may still have with him. Police were also fearful of being accidentally shot by people out looking for a bad guy. The search continued for 3 days, with McAuliffe managing to evade capture despite close calls. He was spotted sleeping in a barn by farmer Bert Luce, who reported seeing him flee with what appeared to be a Sten gun. The fugitive survived by drinking from a farmer's water pump and eating raw potatoes from fields. Finally, on the afternoon of Saturday, June 24th, the manhunt came to an end. Graham Haggerty, a 20-year-old resident of Vienna, Ontario, was searching with 2 OPP constables when they spotted a man running into the woods. Haggerty followed a path to an old sawmill and found McAuliffe huddled in a corner of the shack. Haggerty, armed with a deer rifle, confronted the fugitive. Quote, "Put him up or I'll kill you," he shouted, later telling the Toronto Star, quote, "I meant it because I knew both Art Lierman and Bill Goddyn had been slaughtered when they got in the same position that I did late Saturday afternoon," end quote. McAuliffe, exhausted and defeated, surrendered without a fight. He was described as having a 4-day stubble of red whiskers and his chest covered in scratches from his flight through the underbrush. As police took him into custody, they covered his head with an old rug to prevent onlookers from seeing his face, preserving the integrity of future identification procedures. The capture of Joseph Herbert McAuliffe marked the end of a terrifying chapter for the people of Norfolk County. However, it was just the beginning of a legal process that would captivate the nation and reignite debates about crime, punishment, and the nature of justice in post-war Canada. More after a quick break. And we are back. Matthew, thoughts so far?
You know, we're living in a very complex world right now.
Yes.
And because this is back in my own home turf, and it's, 20 years before I was born, but not much had changed by the 1970s. It makes me think of simpler times and small towns and how they were much simpler times, but in some ways so much more complex, right? Because we didn't have systems and procedures in place, but obviously not because of the murder, but I don't know. I'm just sitting here kind of longing for the 70s.
Longing for the 70s?
Yeah.
I kind of understand that. They were simpler times in a way, and that's kind of the thing. At the same time, we have it a little bit easier right now.
We do.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be out as a gay man in my hometown in the 1970s.
No, you would be a confirmed bachelor.
Or I'd be having rocks thrown through my window.
Oh, gross. Yeah, you don't want that. The investigation into his crimes intensified after McAuliffe's capture. Initially refusing to provide his real name, McAuliffe was booked under the alias Frank West. However, his true identity was soon uncovered thanks to fingerprint matches and a photograph circulated in the press. Mrs. Emile Lazier, who ran a boarding house in Windsor, recognized McAuliffe from the newspaper photos and informed the RCMP. This breakthrough led investigators to McAuliffe's rented garage in Windsor, where they discovered the extent of his counterfeiting operation. The garage contained a drill press, grinder, lathes, cutting tools, literature on coinage, and many unfinished counterfeit coins. Police also found an arsenal of weapons and ammunition, including parts of a submachine gun. The discovery painted a picture of McAuliffe as a meticulous criminal who had been planning his illicit activities for some time. Further evidence came to light when 10-year-old Larry Holmes, searching for crow's nests near the murder site, stumbled upon McAuliffe's discarded clothing and a cache of stolen money. The boy's discovery included the submachine gun and $521 in $1 bills. Most crucially, a constable found a small tinfoil in one of the coat's pockets with a partial fingerprint matching McAuliffe's left little finger, providing irrefutable evidence linking him to the crimes.
Kids never discover crime evidence anymore.
No?
You look back and it's like, because kids were out stomping around and searching through stuff and looking for crow's nests and stumbling upon things they shouldn't. And I don't know. Yeah, but everyone's face is in a video screen now.
It's usually a hiker that finds things now.
Yeah, it's not a kid, it's a hiker.
Yeah. As the case against McAuliffe solidified, details of his background emerged. Born in North Bay, Ontario, he had been raised by an aunt in Windsor after his mother's death. Before World War II, he had run afoul of the law for petty burglaries. During the war, he served as a sergeant in the Canadian Army, working as a military artificer responsible for firearm maintenance. McAuliffe's sister Irene later revealed aspects of their troubled childhood. Their mother had died during the 1918 flu pandemic, leaving the children alone with her body for several days before they were discovered. Irene described Herbert as an affectionate child who faced abuse from their father and stepmother, leading both siblings to run away from home eventually. The trial of Joseph Herbert McAuliffe began on September 5, 1950, at the Norfolk County Courthouse in Simcoe. Defended by W. E. Ross, a young local lawyer, McAuliffe maintained a stoic demeanor throughout the proceedings. The defense attempted to argue self-defense, claiming that McAuliffe had only fired after being shot at by Lierman. However, the prosecution, led by Crown Attorney D.E.W. Tisdale, presented overwhelming evidence. Over 60 witnesses testified and 102 exhibits were introduced. The jury deliberated for just 3 hours before finding McAuliffe guilty on both charges of first-degree murder.
60 witnesses.
Back in that day, that's a lot of people.
It's like half the town.
Half the town. Exactly. On September 14th, 1950, Mr. Justice R.W. Treleaven sentenced McAuliffe to death by hanging. McAuliffe barely reacted. The execution date was set for December 19th, 1950. In the months leading up to his execution, McAuliffe's case continued to draw attention. His new lawyer, Arthur Maloney of Toronto, filed appeals on McAuliffe's behalf, arguing that the trial judge had erred on points of law in his instructions to the jury. These appeals were rejected by both the Supreme Court of Ontario and the Supreme Court of Canada. As his execution date approached, McAuliffe spent his final days seeking solace in religion, as many convicted killers do. He was visited by the aunt who raised him, his father, and his sister who maintained belief in his innocence. Sister Irene recalled speaking to her brother about the crimes. She said later, quote, "When I saw Herbie, the first question I asked him was, where did he get the gun? And when he said, it's not very long ago I had a gun in my hand and I could kill anybody I wanted to, I was told to kill. I said, when do you mean? He said, when I joined the army. They put a gun in my hand and said, you can kill who you like. It's a war. And I said, well, then I guess they taught you how to kill. He said, yes, the army taught me how to kill. I really couldn't believe that he did it. I thought it must have been somebody else. They must have made a mistake." End quote.
Yeah, the army taught him how to kill.
Yeah.
But they didn't teach him how to murder.
Right. It's an excuse, of course.
There's many, 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 many soldiers, millions, who have been taught how to kill in war that don't kill people who are chasing you because you've robbed the bank.
Right. And I mean, this is the guy's sister speaking. She obviously has a bias in a way that, you know, we can respect that. She doesn't want to believe that her brother did this terrible thing.
Of course.
Yeah.
I find it interesting. She said her first question was, where'd you get the gun? Not, why did you kill people?
Right. Oh, well. His only other visitor was Father Douglas Boyer, the local priest. As the execution approached, controversy swirled in Simcoe. Many residents, uncomfortable with a hanging taking place in their community, signed petitions calling for the death sentence to be commuted to life imprisonment. Others argued for establishing a central place of execution away from local communities. The municipal council even requested, and was granted, that the tradition of tolling church bells to announce the execution be suspended. McAuliffe wrote a letter to Irene. It read in part, "To my dear sister Irene. Irene, I'm crying for the first time, I believe, since we were kids together. Tonight I'm going to die. I'm a man, Irene. I'm going to die like one. If anyone ever asks you how your brother died, tell them just that. Father Boyer tells me I will be buried here at St. Mary's Cemetery in Simcoe. I think I will feel lonesome there among strangers far from Elmont. I would like to have been buried in Elmont, near Grandma, where you and Mary could visit the grave. I have $78 that you and Mary can divide between you. Goodbye, Irene. I love you, Brother Herbie. End quote. In the early hours of December 19, 1950, Joseph Herbert McAuliffe was led to the gallows. He refused the customary offer of a glass of whiskey and went to his death in silence. The execution, however, did not go smoothly. The hangman botched the job, and McAuliffe slowly strangled for 17 minutes before being pronounced dead. Father Boyer, who was present, recalled his feelings. The priest said, quote, I did not anticipate going to the gallows with a young man and seeing him die in front of me. I was disturbed by it, and I have been since. Dr. C.K. McIntosh, who attended the execution, later testified, quote, the execution was a bit botched by the fact that the stylite process on the second cervical vertebra had failed to mash into the lower part of the cerebellum. The point is, he died, in my opinion, from strangulation. Undoubtedly, there was some brain damage done, but his heart beat, I guess, for maybe 10 or 12 minutes after he hit the end of the rope. End quote. McAuliffe's body was placed into a casket and buried in a grave at St. Mary's Roman Catholic Cemetery. The burial took place under cover of darkness, with police officers using flashlights to navigate the snow-covered graveyard. It was a stark contrast to the funerals of Arthur Lierman and William Goddyn, who were laid to rest surrounded by mourning family and friends. The execution of Joseph Herbert McAuliffe marked the end of a tragic chapter in Canadian criminal history, but its repercussions would be felt for years to come. The case reignited debates about capital punishment and the nature of justice in post-war Canada. Many who were involved in the case continued to grapple with its impacts decades later. The families of the victims, too, carried the weight of the tragedy. Art Lierman's son Peter, interviewed years later, said, quote, he was only 31, and my mother lost her husband. His family lost my dad, my sister and I lost our father, and it doesn't end. It doesn't end at that point in time, It just escalates as the years go by. The loss is there forever, end quote. The McAuliffe case became a touchstone in discussions about crime and punishment in Canada. Some viewed his execution as retribution for his crimes, while others saw it as a barbaric practice that should be abolished. The case also raised questions about the role of rehabilitation in the justice system. Some speculated that his path might have been different if McAuliffe had received proper support and love in early life.
So, I don't want to live in a society of vengeance, right?
No.
I don't want to live in a society where politicians call for the death of criminals. But I also want to live in a society where there is punishment, but also rehabilitation, Mike.
Yeah.
Right? And it's where rehabilitation is possible. And I think as a society, we need to balance that. And I don't think we do that right now. You and I've spoken about this. I think a lot of people get parole way too early. But and I think a lot of people then jump on we need capital punishment. It's like, well, no, we need stronger punishment and rehabilitation. I think we've gone a little bit too far to one side sometimes.
We've become soft on crime, Matthew.
We've become soft on crime. I sound like a crotchety old man, don't I?
Yeah.
Kids today, you get off my lawn.
Get off my lawn. We used to have this lady who we would walk by this house every day on the way home from school, and there was a...
And you were little shits every time, probably.
Yep, stay off the lawn. And it was like every kid in the neighborhood used to just jump on the lawn and run off. And it would just, had that lady not put that sign there, no one would have done a thing. That would have never happened. However, it was like she was inviting this rebellion from these little turds.
Is that why every time Steve sees a keep dogs off the lawn sign, he goes and pees?
Well, if Steve can read, maybe we should set him to work doing some of our research.
Steve can read.
Oh, well, there you go.
Yeah.
I'll send him some books.
Steve the reading dog.
Yeah. In the decades following McAuliffe's execution, Canada's approach to criminal justice evolved significantly. Capital punishment was abolished in 1976, with the last executions having taken place in 1962. The McAuliffe case remains a stark reminder of a different era in Canadian law and society. The legacy of the McAuliffe case extends beyond the realm of criminal justice. It serves as a poignant example of how a single act of violence can ripple through a community, affecting not just the immediate victims and their families, but entire generations. The small town of Langton and the surrounding Norfolk County were forever changed by the events of that summer day in 1950. Today, the story of Joseph Herbert McAuliffe serves as a complex study in criminology, law enforcement, and local history. It raises enduring questions about the nature of evil, the limits of justice, and the capacity for redemption. Some blame Herb's victims, saying they should never have chased him, that shooting at him left him no choice but to kill. The evidence, though, says otherwise, especially that which points to the fatal shots coming from point-blank pistol fire after the pursuer's weapon became inoperable. Before we close, you sent me a picture of the Imperial Bank in Langton, Ontario, and it's back in the day, and it's one of those, the pictures, I think, from the era that this occurred, and there's like ivy on the front of this edifice. I mean,
it's on the corner. It's like a shop. It's not like a big bank. It looks like a little shop, right?
Yeah, it's a building that is. It looks like a little tiny bank. Is what it looks like. It's very cute. And that's it for Dark Poutine episode 357, Murder and Mayhem in Norfolk County.
That's right. It's time for voicemails. You can leave us a message at 1-877-327-5786 or 1-877-DARK-PTN. We'd love to hear from you. Let's see who called us this week.
Okay, so we do have a few voicemails this week, and we'll start with two from the same person, but that person will explain why.
Hi, Mike. Hi, Matthew. My name is Frankie Walsh from Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island. I am I've been listening for a year or so, and really liking the podcast, loving it. I definitely need a list here of things, but it's fine. Just wanted to join my fellow PEI gals in their calling in and message leaving. But, I also wanted to mention, too, like, I appreciate all the, wow, what are words? The fact that you bring the knowledge to the victims as opposed to the perpetrators is definitely one of my favorite parts about the podcast. So, before I start reading off my grocery list, go take a crap in your lobster traps.
So Frankie called back because I thought, what the heck is going on? Like, Frankie sounds really distracted. So Frankie called back and explained.
Hello, hi, yes, it's me, Frankie again. Somebody literally walked up to me in the middle of that last voicemail, so I ended up leaving something out. But your outro music, anytime I hear it, I imagine Matthew, like, ascending into some type of just, like, greater realm, but like not in a death way. But when he had COVID, and I really hope this doesn't offend anybody, but I was imagining like Jesus on the cross ascending. And I really hope I'm not the only one that finds that funny. So anyway, bye.
Okay.
Oh my God.
So
I friggin' love Frankie.
Yes.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
So I think the funniest thing in both of those are, what are words?
What are words?
Words are symbols, Frankie. Vessels of meaning that shape thought, reality, and connection.
So, she's got the phone to her ear, and there's somebody staring at her stupidly. Like, what are you doing on the phone? Hey, I need your attention here.
That's so funny. It's funny that you thought of me ascending during the outro music. When we go into voicemails, I usually do a little dance in my chair.
Yeah, he does a gay little dance.
Oh, it's a gay little dance, is it?
Well, absolutely.
If the shoe fits.
Can you do a straight little dance, Matthew?
Oh yeah, yeah. I love pretending I'm dancing like a straight guy. It's just sort of like barely any movement. Sort of like snap your fingers.
Oh God. Anyway, thank you so much, Frankie. And we do have another voicemail, so let's have a listen to that one.
Hey guys, I'm a newer listener, but I love the podcast. You guys are awesome. I'm an American. My name's DJ. I'm from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Well, just outside of Pittsburgh. But it's so great hearing stories I haven't heard much of and hearing a lot about the Canadian aspects of things. I really liked the Argo episode and just hearing about how Canada was more involved and kind of like what the movie portrayed. No, just keep it up, guys. You guys are awesome. I wish I wasn't so poor so I could donate to you guys with like some coffee or patronage or whatever I could do. But unfortunately, I'm a stay-at-home dad with 3 kids and don't have a lot of extra cash. But you guys are great, and it's really been awesome listening to you guys. And if I could just get a quick shout-out to my boys, Wilder, Wynn, and Cedar. They'd love to hear their names, on a podcast. It'd be really cool. All right, love you guys. Keep up the good work. Mike and Matt, you guys are awesome. Thanks. Bye.
There you go. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, home of the Penguins, and Nova Scotia's own Sidney Crosby as the captain. There you go. And it's ice hockey, man.
I now have the song, Last Night a DJ Saved My Life.
Why is that?
Because his name's DJ.
Oh, of course.
Doi. So thank you for calling in, DJ. Three kids. Three Rugrats. Oh my God.
Yeah.
I don't know how you do it, my friend.
I don't have one. I have 2 cats, and that's more than enough for me.
I have a dog, and that's way more than enough.
Yeah.
Anyway, so DJ's had one for himself and one for each of us, so we don't have to do it.
Well, we didn't give a job to Frankie back in PEI. We'll give one to. We know DJ's a stay-at-home dad, but
he's also DJ.
So he's also a DJ.
Yeah, Frankie is just wild and free.
There you go, wild and free, Frankie.
Frankie is just wild and free. I'm not going to give Frankie a job.
Good.
Frankie goes beyond jobs.
Frankie goes to Hollywood.
Frankie goes to Hollywood, and DJ's a DJ. He probably gets that all of his life, and is like rolling his eyes.
Exactly. All right, we are moving forward in time, and yes, just despite ourselves,
it just won't stop.
It won't stop. That's it for this week's voicemails. Again, you can leave us one at 1-877-327-5786 or 1-877-DARK-PTN. We'd love to hear from you, even if it is just to say hi and to tell us to go shit in our hats. If you're stumped for what to chat with us about, a quick story is welcome. Now it's time for Patreon and Donut Money donors, and we do have a patron. We really do. Our first patron this week is Sophie Gionnet, and she is from Dieppe, New Brunswick. Nouveau Brunswick.
Wow, I didn't know there was a Dieppe in New Brunswick.
There absolutely is. There's a lot of names from England and the UK in English-speaking parts of Canada. In the French parts of Canada, there are names that are French from France.
I know that.
Amazing. Amazing. So, what do you think Sophie does for work there in Dieppe, Matthew?
Sofer. Okay, let me start again. Sophie is a perfumer.
She's a perfumer.
A creator of scents. She's part chemist, part artist, and part poet of the senses.
Well, there you go. That's great. That's great stuff. So keep it up. Hopefully your perfume don't stink, Sophie.
No, she bottles the ephemeral.
Oh, I love that. Matthew, you must be a marketing person or something.
Is.
I need you to come over here and write some copy, young man, about my tobacco. It's toasted.
Gentlemen, this is taste was my last campaign.
Oh, this is taste. Oh, dear. Anyway, thank you so much, Sophie. Much appreciated. And we do have a donut money donor this week, and it is our good friend Marina Bedard from Peterborough. Matthew, you know where Peterborough is. And Marina says, enjoy treats for you, Matt, and all the fur babies. All the fur babies. So thank you, Marina. What do you think Marina does for work there in Peterborough, Matthew?
She's a neon bender.
She mends neon?
Bender.
Oh, bender. She's a bender?
She's a sculptress of light.
You're not going to address the bender comment?
Oh, will you use that term over here? Does anyone know that term over here?
I don't know if they do.
Bender, uphill gardener.
Uphill gardener.
Shirt lifter. No, Marina is a neon bender. She takes glass tubes, heats them with an open flame, and sort of creates like beautiful.
Oh, that's fun.
Shapes, yeah.
So, yeah, I really would like some proper neon stuff maybe behind me when I'm doing my thing on video kind of thing, because it's fun. I like neon. Neon's pretty. Have you been to the neon? I don't know if they still have it.
Did you know that Vancouver was the neon capital of the world at one time?
I do. You and I had this discussion while we were downtown.
Last time we were on Granville Street.
Yeah. And there was a neon museum at the Vancouver Museum for a while.
There? Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if it's still there, but it was really cool. So they had a lot of the old neon that used to be in the city, like the Smiling Buddha Cafe sign with the Buddha in neon. Yeah, it's very cool. Anyway, if it's still around, check it out. If it's not, whoops.
If it's not, enjoy what else is there.
Exactly. Thanks to all our patrons and Donut Money donors, past and present, for your generosity. It helps to keep the show going. You can become a patron of Dark Poutine at patreon.com/darkpoutine. For a one-time donation, you can send us donut money via PayPal or interact using our email address, darkpoutinepodcast@gmail.com. If you don't already subscribe to the show, it would mean a lot if you did. You can easily find Dark Poutine on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows. If you haven't gotten yours yet, my 2 books are available to order via links on the Dark Poutine website or anywhere fine books are sold. And speaking of darkpoutine.com, check it out for show notes and other cool stuff. We'd appreciate it if you gave Dark Poutine a like or a follow on Facebook and Instagram. Most importantly, thank you for listening. Tell your friends about us. Word of mouth is a powerful thing. And that's it for this episode of Dark Poutine. So until next time, don't forget to be a good egg and not a bad apple.
Bye.
Bye.